By the way, you notice I told Trey to turn it over. That actually is completely appropriate for what we're talking about today with Kevin Lindsey. You know him. He is the head honcho for maintenance over at Travel Centers of America. TA Petro's Kevin Lindsey joins us as he is oft wont to do on Maintenance Matters. Hey, man. I was hoping we would be able to talk about you guys playing in the championship game, but you may be the only SEC team that actually behaved with honor during this whole tournament process. Sorry, close but no cigar, but you guys have a bright future, by the way. Got some good assistant coaches, and it looks like somehow, miraculously, like Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, you might have gotten the right guy by assistance. So that's pretty cool.
Right.
Pretty cool.
I think that's right. That's
I,
right.
So
Uh,
I talked about turning stuff over, and we can go back and forth as we always do between everything else. It is cold. It is cold everywhere in the country. I know that because it's cold here. It was actually genuinely cold this morning, as Dre can tell you as well, too. I had that, what I would call Tourette syndrome cold. You know what I'm talking about? When you literally walk outside and you actually, every single curse word you've accumulated in the 50-plus years you've existed comes pouring out of your mouth. That's where I am. Starting trucks in the cold is hard, and you want to talk about that, don't you?
oh, yeah, a little bit. But I wanted to address Bandit's situation there. Not sure where he's at, but I know we were talking about cold weather stuff and everything on this, but he that fifth wheel issue, you can see that kind of come up in cold weather like this, because you get so much grease and all that stuff gets gunked up, built up, and next thing you know, it's actually thrown the jaws out of adjustment or whatever. So,
Let me ask you a question about that too, because that kind of relates to some of the other stuff we're talking about as well too. So many things that actually keep your truck really loosey-goosey and allow it to breathe and live in the summertime and in the Indian summer, as some people call it, often start to betray you as the weather gets colder, don't they?
oh yeah, for sure.
I mean,
That's one of those. That's common.
anything that requires movement and lubrication suddenly has a big problem once the weather kind of drops down. I mean, that really is that kind of goes back to that whole thing about, forget about air filters for a second. Even before air
Yeah.
filters, you can't get to air filters unless you're checking everything. I don't know if you heard the story I told earlier, but the Tennessee Highway Patrol found a piece of machinery with 19 violations on it. 19 violations. And one of the things that really put a chill up my spine was one of its tubes was practically dust. And I just kept thinking,
Mm.
man, this is the result of not doing a pre-trip. And I know that sounds quite obvious, but people don't realize is that it's one of those things about doing a pre-trip that goes back to what we're talking about today, that people don't realize that they're just little things that you'll get to. And it's one thing to do a pre-trip when you know you'll get to it later, but when you don't do the pre-trip, you don't know what to get to. And it sounds so
That's
obvious.
exactly right. You don't, right?
Yeah.
And making a habit out of a good pre-trip, as I've always said, is only going to do you some good.
So, and I wanted to ask about that. What we're talking about with starting and charging, by the way, because how much of starting and charging and the issues that go along with that, even in cold weather, can be prevented by doing a good pre-trip,
Oh, that's
right?
that's a tough one,
Right?
because when you get to the electrical side of everything, that's one of those mysteries of technicians, that diesel technicians, heavy truck technicians. They always act like the electrical side of things is such a mystery, and it's because you can't see it, right?
Right.
You can't see it, but you know, you know, kind of like a lot of things I sent in about this cold weather starting and charging. That starter is really needy. It needs a lot of current. That's the one item on the truck on a heavy duty diesel engine that's gonna require the most energy to get going. And it's really hard to see that stuff. I've made mention in the past on here about a pre-trip, looking at your battery box, making sure you don't get all this gunk, dust, and sediment built up on top of those batteries, which can cause a parasitic drain and stuff. So you got to make sure you keep all that done and any corrosion down, all that good stuff. So,
I had an epiphany the other night because I was thinking as I was getting ready for this segment. You sent me your notes, by the way, and by the way, guys, if you ever we were talking about writing a book before, and I'm always kind of curious if you actually put all these notes together and to try to organize them into a book. And there's some people would say just put the whole damn thing inside of a Chat GPT. My problem is it would spit back out a technical manual in homespun folksy wisdom. But one of the things I was thinking about is that along with, I swear to God, I know our listeners are going, no Shasta Sherlock on this. But along with the air filter joke we make all the time, because Dean talks about this as well, and you and I have talked about this. I always ask Dean what he does to make sure the Grumpy Pete is where it needs to be, and he talks about cleaning his tires. And people go, what are you talking about? And I totally get where he's talking about. The idea is that part of your pre-trip should be making sure that stuff is simply clean. And I know that sounds
yeah,
crazy, but cleaning and changing your air filters. Here's the thing let's make an HVAC comparison here. People don't realize that the majority of dust in a house, of course, is the residue of human skin. And when you say it like that, people kind of start crawling up the walls, which means there's just more residue of human skin. But what people don't realize is that if you clean your house on a regular basis, you work the filters less. And when you work the filters less, you have a cleaner, more breathable house. So the combination of keeping up with the cleaning on a regular basis along with changing the filters gives you a place worth living. The same can actually apply in regards to maintenance, is that the first two crucial things you have to do is keep the damn thing clean, not just on the outside, but really check for all that stuff you're talking about, and then do the filter determination. A lot of that allows you to focus on what's really wrong. Is that fair?
it is. It is. And let me throw this out there. I'm going to tie this back to something you said earlier. My good friends at the Tennessee Highway Patrol are just like a lot of other inspectors that are out there, commercial vehicle inspectors. Cleanliness, the old cliche, cleanliness is next to godliness.
Yeah.
Well, if you pull into scales and you've got a rig that's just nasty, dirty, it's had wheel seals seeping and there's dust built up, and you haven't washed it in 2 months, and they're going to be more apt to look harder at that. I'm just saying, it's human nature.
Oh, it's an inclination. I will tell you right now. I'm gonna be really honest, and this is taking you back in the day. It's really funny. Why did you have him get out of the car? I swear to God, he had so much crap on the other side of his car, down underneath the dashboard. I swear to God. I swear to God. I know guys on highway patrol. I know guys in traffic who literally told me they've pulled people over and their car has looked. I swear to God, this is absolute truth. Now, it's a different thing if the person is really rich. I know a couple of policemen who are like, you know what, you need to be taken down a peg. I make no apologies for those guys. But I know other people that have pulled over ladies taking their kids to school for one thing or another. They got a couple of kids in the car, and the car is impeccably cleaned, and the kids are well behaved, and they have a tail light out, Kevin. And they kind of go, you know what, dude, go get that taken care of. Not today.
Yeah.
You obviously, you got some kids in the car. You need to get that checked out. But it's obvious that you take care of the car and you take care of these kids. You get to move on. And there's something to be said for that kind of approach. People don't realize it does make a difference. And in a very, very busy day, you've got to make sometimes split-second decisions about who you're going to look at and who you're not. And the better you look, the more they can write something off, pun intended, as something that happened while you were out there on the road, something you just missed despite doing your diligence. You get forgiven when the rest of your situation is really what you would call packed up, as it were. You know what I'm saying? If you've tightened everything else up, it becomes a lot easier to let you take a walk, as it were. And it's such a good point and so well said. I wanted to ask you, by the way, because cold oil, everything being cold makes it harder to start up in the morning. So is there any way around that? I mean, is there any way to make sure that the viscosity and the what I would call that makes it so tough to start sometimes in the morning can be mitigated before you do that?
Yeah, and it's possible, but what you got to keep in mind, and I always try to remind people of this, you got to follow your engine manufacturers. recommendations when it comes to oil viscosity and different things like that, because they designed that engine. If they designed that engine to run with 5W30, and you're constantly changing your oils because you lack 15W40, you can expect some more issues. And part of that could be starting, because you stop and think about it. If they're only requiring 5W30, a little bit thinner, a little bit lighter oil, that and we won't get into the castor oil guys talks here, but it can actually, especially in colder weather, it's going to really tighten that engine up more, which is going to require more energy for that starter, which means the starter needs to be a little bigger with that 15W40 in it, so the starter may not even be, starters on these big trucks, they've made smaller and smaller over the years, but yet they're more efficient than they ever used to be. So it's tough. It's tough.
Well, I'll tell you this too.
I'm going to get that balance.
I'm going to state the obvious as well too, because like I said, people, I was making the joke. I was talking to some people from DAT yesterday, just having a conversation, and I asked them what they thought I did for a living. I wasn't being a jerk. It was actually a fun conversation, and they both had pretty good answers, and they were both really, really close. And what I said to them was, my job ultimately, now your job is to give information about how we maintain trucks. My job is to make 4 hours go by in the blink of an eye. I said everything else is a moral decision that I make. Do I use grievance? Do I use joy? Do I use information? Do I use some kind of nice combination of all three of those things? At the end of the day, what people don't realize is if you state things in the simplest terms, like the federal government is nothing more than an insurance company with an army, once you say that, you kind of go, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? This is the most basic thing, is the fact that a diesel engine is dead until it isn't. And what people don't understand is the reason why when an EMT truck shows up to save your life, if in fact you've had a heart attack, what do? They actually get essentially the human equivalent of jumper cables, and they put them on your chest.
Yes.
And they bring you back.
Yes.
And so what you're doing, and I know it sounds so stupid and obvious, people need to understand, your truck, if it's lying there and it's not started, it's dead. And,
it is.
And that's the thing. You are bringing something back to life. And as anybody will tell you, any ambulance, EMT will tell you, what happens there is that even when you bring something back to life, you're doing damage to it. You jumpstart somebody's heart, you're doing damage to it. So every time you turn the damn truck over, you are bringing it closer to its expiration date.
And that's funny you say that, because something I read years ago, and I can't remember what engine training it was I was in or whatever, but I remember reading this years ago, but like 80% of all wear on internal engine components, such as, main bearings, rod bearings, different things like that, occur at startup.
Thank you very much. We could have just skipped everything I just said there and gone right to the main event. We're also talking about bringing something to life that has no spark plug, correct?
Exactly, right? I mean, it's a little different than gasoline engines, right?
Right.
Because you got to get it turning over with enough oomph to create enough compression that when you inject fuel into it, it can combust. But that takes some heat, and which takes more compression.
I actually have another great analogy here. And like I said, I work in these analogies not because it's clever. I work in them because it's a better way of helping people, especially people who are just getting into this industry and who don't have the farming background. Or I was very lucky that I had a couple of shade mechanics in my life, so I know enough to be dangerous. One time, a friend of mine told me in regards to, he'd had a car sitting in his garage for a very long time. And I'm talking about, we're in Ohio, and it is cold. And he said, you're bringing this thing back to life. He said, it's as if it fell through the ice. It's as if it was a human being that fell through the ice. And he said, if you don't warm it up properly, it could still hurt it, by the way. And I never thought about that.
Yeah.
That people don't realize that if, you don't sit, That was my question. So he made the point, say, if you don't let this thing sit here long enough and you just take it out there, you're going to have problems for the first like 5 to 10 minutes you're driving. How long, once you get the thing turned over, especially with a diesel, should you sit there? Because heat compression is what brings these suckers to life. How long should you sit there before you can actually run properly too? And can you do any damage from running it on the moment it starts up, meaning taking it out there?
Yeah, from the moment it starts up, yes. That's another thing I see people do. They'll start a big truck up and put their foot on the throttle for some reason. Give it a minute. Give it a minute to let oil get to flowing properly. Especially, and that's even more drastic damage you're doing in colder weather because everything's cold. So, if it's been sitting overnight, what we call a cold soak, so to speak, uh, basically everything in that engine on that truck is at whatever air temperature is, right? If it's been sitting there for more than 6 to 8 hours. So if it's 20 degrees outside, you got to figure everything's 20 degrees there or pretty close to it. It'll hold a little heat overnight, but not that much.
The other thing is, and I have a really kind of lovely romance story. I somehow managed to work romance into Maintenance Matters. It's also important. This is why pre-trip's important as well too, because in a particularly cold situation, we were making a joke about what's happening in Tennessee. The idea the guy didn't even inspect the fact that everything was kind of turning to dust. You got to let it warm up too, because certain things might have water and ice on them that need to kind of melt their way off before you get out there. Correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Because you really you can't see everything. Even doing a great pre-trip, you're not going to see everything because there could be stuff, up on moisture up on top of the transmission that's has froze, turned to ice overnight next to an airline. Now that also means that if the ice is right outside of that airline, and maybe that airline's in a puddle of water that's sitting there, it freezes. Well, any moisture that was in that airline is also froze. So now you've got little ice flakes, right, in that air system, and you start it up and it starts moving air through it. It could damage seals. You'd never know. Anything that's mechanical can have issues in colder weather more than it would in warmer weather.
Kevin, I wanted to ask you, in your notes, there's a lot of really great information, but there was a particular one I wanted to ask you about. You said batteries may be damaged from summer heat. Can you kind of unpack that and explicate that a little bit? That was the one where it kind of stopped me in my tracks, because in the middle of all this cold stuff and trying to find heat, you jumped us back to the summer. And I think I get the logic of it, but can you explain that a little bit more and how that impacts what happens in the winter?
Well, that's one of those things that gets overlooked a lot because especially if you run, the Southwest during the summer, and during the summer months when it's 118 degrees, that's most everything we have and build is not designed to necessarily run consistently at those higher temperatures. And batteries are very susceptible to the extremes, whether it's extreme cold or extreme heat. And that extreme heat can actually drain those batteries down so bad that when the cold weather hits, because you got to remember, even maintenance-free batteries there's liquid in there, even if they're gel cell batteries, absorbed glass material, AGM batteries. There's still some liquid. There's moisture in those batteries, and those things can freeze. But at the same time, from the summertime when they're so hot, that moisture can boil out. So that messes with that chemistry inside that battery. Whether it's actually you see anything or not from that, but it's
I'm going to stop us here for a second to let you know that Trucker Bosun said I bought me one of those ionic detox foot spas the other day. I'll let you all know how it works here after I get a chance to use it. Don't ever forget, by the way, that warming yourself up is also really important. The Paranormal Pie Man says, I don't know, Kevin. I don't know, Jimmy. When my truck was squeaky clean, I got inspected twice at both the E and WB scales on the I-94 in Indiana. Well, by the way, you answered your own question, Paranormal Pie Man. Indiana. They don't care. They inspect everybody. I mean, anybody. Look, I love the state of Indiana, and I think a lot of people are going to be rooting for them in this upcoming championship game. But those folks are literally the definition of trucking is a piggy bank. Come on, man. Of course you're going to get inspected in Indiana. And Marty Ellis says, good morning from Tokerville in Utah. Good morning to you, Mr. OOIDA. I hope you are safe out there on the highways and byways. And our good friend Chowder wanted to say that he's a badass because he's 5'9". How tall are you, Kevin, by the way?
I'm even bigger of a badass because I'm 5'7".
By the way, yeah, you're Tom Cruise country, dude. I'm telling you right now, low center of gravity, tough guy, can jump out of airplanes with aerodynamic
right.
speed. That's what's going on right there. I'm
not jumping out of airplanes.
Yeah, ever again, ever. I mean, it's like, literally when Tenring called me this morning and said he's jumped out of air. I've done it twice. I did it the second time to make sure I disliked it as much as I did the first time. Just wanted to make sure that was a reality. This is really funny, too, by the way, Dre. When I jumped out of an airplane, the first time I ever did it, we got there, and I saw the first instructor giving all these really kind of complicated kind of explanations for stuff. And I walked over to the guy, Kevin, and I said, what do I need to know? And he said, you need to know you're going to have an awesome time. Let's go. And I'm like, that's not good enough. I
need more.
That is not going to cut it. Hate to break the bad news. Okay, we got about 2 minutes. I got about a minute here left, by the way. Is on the flip side of it, we said get the thing warmed up, but you don't want to stay too long. You don't want to idle too much either, right? Because that can really mess with the battery as well, right?
Oh yeah. Well, you want to idle it for a while. I know I never really answered that question because I'll be honest with you, there's no OEM out there that actually says you should do this for this amount of time. I will point out that in most modern trucks with all the computer controls on them, they actually do run better in the cold than they used to. It don't mean that, hey, I started this thing up. Hey, he said it runs better, so I can just go ahead and take off. Warm it up for a little bit, thaw some of that stuff out. Get it, let it come to life a little.
Kevin, I'm going to make you proud of me. I'm really going to make you proud of me here as we wrap this thing up. How about this? You know the natural harmonics of your truck. When you start it up, when you hear those natural harmonics, because here's the thing too. I mean, I started the car this morning, and like I said, it was genuinely cold last night, and I could hear it take a little bit more of a gasp of oxygen to get itself there. I didn't have any problems turning it over, but that it's a little bit longer, even with a car, to get it started. And I sat there until the car sounded normal, until the vehicle sounded the way it usually sounds, and then I pulled out. It really goes back to the idea that you talk about, that natural harmonic. Is that the good time to roll out when you hear it sound the way it's supposed to sound?
Absolutely. I will agree with you 100% on that. If it sounds funny, maybe it's not time yet. Right?
Natural harmonic, and by the way, maybe you should go get some maintenance on it if in fact it never sounds normal. We never sound normal here, but we love having Kevin Lindsey of TravelCenters of America. He's the guy that's in charge of maintenance over there for this ongoing wonderful segment, Maintenance Matters. I say these things to encourage our sponsors to continue to do so. Thank you very much, Kevin. We can't wait to talk to you next week.